Hello, fellow gardeners. Welcome or welcome back to another great Cultivate event. Whether this is your first or your 16th Cultivate, we are so glad you are here. My name is Muriel Lanford. I'm a Bexar County Master Gardener, and I will be your host for this fall's online workshops. These classes are part of Cultivate. It's an educational seminar that we hold twice a year, and this is our 16th Cultivate. And believe it or not, can you believe we have had several individuals online who've attended every one of our Cultivate events since its inception in 2017? So we truly appreciate your interest and your participation. Now, at this year's Cultivate, we have some great giveaways. We're going to hold a drawing after the event, tomorrow after the event is over, for 15 $25 gift certificates from Rainbow Gardens Nursery. Every session you attend is a separate entry for these great prizes. So we hope you attend all of them. With each Cultivate event, we try to introduce some new subjects, but also bring back some old favorites. And most of our presenters are Bexar County Master Gardeners, but sometimes we have some guest speakers who are experts in their field. Now, as Master Gardeners, we are part of the AgriLife Extension Service of Texas A&M, which is the community training and education arm of A&M University. Master Gardeners support Texas A&M AgriLife by providing research-based, unbiased, locally relevant gardening and horticultural education. In fact, the BCMG, Bexar County Master Gardener homepage, has extensive resources for you located under our gardening library. That's on our website homepage. There are literally hundreds of publications on multiple horticultural topics for you to access at any time. Now, you can find this information at bearmg.org. If you have any questions during our presentation, please use the Q&A button located at the bottom of your screen. We have a team of Master Gardeners standing by. We'll be ready to answer those questions. But if you have questions for the speaker specifically, I will ask those at the end of the presentation until we run out of time. Now, if we do run out of time, you can contact us at cultivate@bearmg.org. Okay, with that, let's get started. For our first session today, I'd like to introduce Boone Holliday. Boone is currently the extension agent for horticulture, easy for you to say, with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension in Galveston County. And prior to this recent transition, he held a similar title in Fort Bend County for the past 12 years, and that's on the southwest side of Houston, Metroplex, for those of you who don't know. Now, Boone holds an undergraduate degree in horticulture from Stephen F. Austin and a master's degree in agricultural education from Texas A&M. But Boone was an avid gardener and young plant enthusiast long before his formal education. He was also previously on staff with the Texas A&M Department of Horticultural Sciences in College Station and as an urban horticulture educator at Lamar High School in Houston. So Boone has experience in many horticultural industries, from retail horticulture to landscape design, irrigation installation. So he brings all that knowledge, paired with a lot of enthusiasm, into the AgriLife program. We are really lucky to have him. So Boone, with that, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Marielle. I sure appreciate it, and I appreciate the invitation to hang out with some fine Santonians and share some information that I think is quite relevant for our audiences. A lot of jokes go around when we talk about extension agents that reference our go-to on recommending soil analysis, and the fact that it is real. There's stuff in there that we need to know, and it's a big picture. So I want to do a dive into that today and talk about those aspects of soil that maybe we don't understand, some of the dynamics behind them, and some easy things that we can do to balance out or correct issues with imbalances of minerals or organic matter in soil that ends up having a positive or negative impact on our ability to grow plants in it. So part of what we do at an extension office anywhere across the United States is people come into our office and why are my plants yellow? Why are my tomatoes not fruiting, etc. And we tend to get into a conversation about soil, how they're fertilizing, and the amendments that they're adding or not. And so it's quite relevant. So we're going to dive into that. What I'm going to do today is not provide a standard PowerPoint presentation for you. I've been trying something different where we guide through some online resources. If you're familiar with extension work, not only do we have the fine resources of all the umbrella within the Texas A&M University system, but we dive into some of our sister universities and programs across the United States and tap into some resources that they have built online. And so we can kind of move around, swim around, and find the most practical, relevant information to help us understand some of these things. So what I've done here should show on the screen, if that's right, if I can get a thumbs up that you can see this nutrient management document. This will be our guide. Marielle, give me
I'm
a,
sorry. I was having trouble with my audio button. Yes, we can see it just fine.
okay.
Thank you.
All right, fantastic. So, so I've got one right here. If you haven't conducted a soil sample, I'm going to advise you, jokes or not, to conduct one, because there's a lot of gleanings from just this one little document right here that arms you with some strategies on how we can balance out our soil. We can see things that maybe, with the naked eye, we don't understand, and we can start trying to find ways to correct those. And the changes that you would notice are going to be quite obvious in the landscape as far as soil health improvement and the offset benefits of plant health, growth, development, more fruiting, more vigor, more flowering, as a consequence of the work that you've done to respond to those soil issues or needs. So we're going to start off with pH. pH is going to be the balance, or this power of the hydrogen molecule in the soil. And we put that on a scale of 0 to 14, with 7 being neutral, and knowing that the majority of plants perform best at a soil pH that's slightly acidic, and that's about 6.5. There are some examples we get into, blueberries and azaleas, etc., that like a little bit more acidity with the way that they grow. But the majority of them, we want them in that 6.6 to 7 range. And for us, that can be challenging. So let's start here. I've pulled this document to help us out from Colorado State University. And if I scroll into this just a little bit here, I'm going to go down to this chart, right? And we've seen different variations of this chart. But basically, if we scan this, we see this 6.5 to 7. And we look at mineral availability in the soil. So what happens here is, as you go acidic or alkaline, the availability of these minerals become limited as you fall off of this central point. And so it just so happens, if we look at this spot right here, the sweet spot between 6.5 to 7, this is where the majority of our plant necessary minerals are at their highest abundance and availability for the plants. So if there's the simplest way to explain why we want to be there, this is why. Because the soil is not holding those minerals back. And so going further into this, explaining it for folks, we're going to go, well, this first one, raising soil pH. I think for us here, and probably for the greater San Antonio area, we're not trying to raise our pH. We're probably in alkaline areas where our soil naturally is alkaline, and the water that we're applying to those landscapes is even further alkaline. So we're not trying to bring it up for us. So let's scroll down to make this more relevant for us. And let's look at this section here. If I can highlight this. There we go. Um, Basically what we're talking about doing is adding elemental sulfur in response to higher pHs. What's a high pH? Well, when we look on our soil test, like this one here, for example, okay, this one is at a 7.5, and it notes on here that it's slightly alkaline. Okay, so it's not terrible. We may not have to respond to it, but when we get above 7.5, especially 8.0 and higher, um, these regular additions of elemental sulfur converted to sulfuric acid in the soil will help to bring that pH down. Okay, is it permanent? No, but regular additions in our garden setting as we're preparing for a spring garden season, for instance, we can apply the certain recommended value of that sulfur to temporarily bring that pH down to where we want it at. Um, so a general guideline here, 650 pounds of elemental sulfur per acre to lower your soil pH by 1 unit. Okay, so from an 8 to bring it to a 7. Well, are we talking about acreage here? No. So a quick calculation on that for a 100 square foot garden, we'd be talking about 1.5 pounds of elemental sulfur. So you go down to a local feed store, you buy a little 4 pound bag of elemental sulfur, a pound and a half per 100 square foot of garden space, and boom, we've done amazing stuff. So pH is easy to respond to. We'll see that. That'll be the top thing on your soil analysis, the first thing you see on there. And if that is, anywhere above 7.5 or below 6.0 in Northeast Texas, then we want to try to address that. Okay, so that's number one for us. Let's talk too about nitrogen. And I am going to start off here. We have a fantastic publication from our Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Soil Lab. Maybe. Right there. Okay. So here, our publication here, what happens to nitrogen in soils. Now, first off, we need to explain that, out of all these 16 plant available minerals, plant necessary minerals, nitrogen is going to be the most impactful for us. Plants use a whole lot of it. It's very necessary for plant growth and development, and it's limiting. So on this document here, when we get soil samples, usually the nitrogen is very low or non-existent. Okay, and it's because of the reasons right here that we see. All right, out of all of these minerals, this thing is always going away. Okay, one, plant uptake. Plants use a lot of it. For cell growth and development, green foliage development, nitrogen is crucial. So plants are using a lot of it. As it starts to transfer in the soil, it will evaporate. It'll change to nitrogen gas. So it's just evaporating out of the soil naturally. And it is water soluble. So, we get a lot of rain. If we don't have some way to sponge that and hold it in the soil, it's running off, it's eroding out, and it's leaching down into the subsoil, down deeper than the plant roots can mine it back up. So what does that mean for us? Is we need to be very mindful that we're conserving nitrogen, but we're also adding that in ways that can help us keep that level up where it needs to be at here. So best way, as it notes here in the publication, is through good soil and water management practices. Okay, so we're talking about organic matter in the soil that can sponge this. We're talking about mulching over our watering surfaces that's stopping that heavy rainwater from leaching that nitrogen off of the soil profile. Um, we're slowing that down from evaporating due to heat buildup on the soil surface to allow it to evaporate. And we'd be looking at our irrigation practices through water management, looking at drip irrigation, low flow. We're not over applying water that's leaching that off into our roads and then subsequently off into our watershed. So really good publication there. Lots more to read. I'm just going into the basics to help show you what we need to understand. Now, further on that, noting that nitrogen is so whoa, what in the world was I doing there? Okay, we're going to go into this here. Justice Liebig. He's been gone for quite a while, but this concept here I think is very important for you. And he developed what was called the law of the minimum. You may have seen this before. But basically, this barrel up here is trying to provide a graphic to you to understand how the limiting factor within all these minerals is going to define the overall success, vigor, and health of this crop. So nitrogen being the one that tends to be most limiting in the soil usually defines that point. So you can see on here, this nitrogen value should be up here at the top along with the rest of these minerals, but it is minimized because it's deficient in the soil. So this suggests that this plant, if you're envisioning this as a plant, it's only able to perform about 50% of its capabilities health-wise. So when we bring that up, if it surpasses this phosphate here, then the phosphate becomes that limiting factor. So the goal is that we're trying to balance out all these nutrients and get them up to this equivalent factor. If we can get them all just hovering right around that point, then that's where we want to be. And that's where the soil is happy, and that's subsequently where our plants are happy. So if we scroll down here, just referencing that in soil systems, that nitrogen tends to be our limiting factor, and that as we address that, the plant performance will improve. So we look at a lot of samples again, and there's one right here that I showed you. And the nitrates on here are hard to get a good value on, but that value is very, very low. And we want to have that, encourage people to find ways to bring that up. All right. And we can do that in a lot of forms, and through balancing with organic matter is good. But what we're going to find in a lot of our systems is that we need to add a higher percentage, a higher rate nitrogen fertilizers. And so these could be through chemical fertilizers, such as ammonium sulfate, urea, and organic forms such as blood meal that are very high in that nitrogen, of using those to try to bring that level and have it float up where we want. All right, so let's lock that out and see what's up next here. Let's talk about phosphorus. Maybe. Okay, so we've got our publication here on phosphorus, and this one can end up being our monster because it's not the one that typically we see low. We tend to see this high. So when we're fertilizing with balance rate fertilizers, such as a triple 13 regularly, we start to accumulate phosphorus. And what this publication here notes is that it starts having an impact on nutrient availability in the soil. Think of it like a giant magnet in the soil. The more phosphorus we get, that charged molecule starts to suck up and bond to the other minerals that are in the soil, thus making them not plant available, holding them tight. And so I've seen some samples that get really bad, and so using regular fertilizers that have high values of phosphorus are responsible for this, and also overabundance of organic matter. You know, we're always saying compost, organic matter is great. It is great, but too much of a good thing can get you in trouble. So, you know, a lot of these manures and phosphorus compost are also high in phosphorus. And so we need to be careful when we're applying those that we're unknowingly elevating that level. So, and here I've highlighted these two paragraphs here that describes that in more detail. Phosphorus buildup is caused by excessive use of inorganic fertilizer and or the use of compost and manures that are high in phosphorus. Okay. And then further over here, another section that's good to read is being cognizant of that when we're looking at rates. You know, a lot of labeled organic fertilizers, they have their lab developed rates in there. So we would recommend those so that you can read that, you can make those decisions versus just raw products that are a huge question mark for us. Be careful with those because a lot of times we can over apply that phosphorus and again get ourselves in trouble. We go to this second page on this is this duration of the problem component right here. And I'll explain this a little bit, but phosphorus is really, it doesn't evaporate. It is minimally water soluble in the soil. And so what happens is that this really just has to be taken up by plants. It shows here that, high levels of phosphorus will eventually be converted into rock phosphate. So it's remineralizing that. And so it's just staying there. And so what has to happen is those plants gradually have to use that up for it to diminish. So we're talking about years where we can get the parts per million value of the phosphorus down below 150 to 200. And that can take several years. On here it says 3 to 5 years. So be careful with it. And I'll show you an example of it. I've got a no, this one here. We see this is a typical report, soil analysis report. We can see at the top up here, we've got 7.7 RPH, nitrogen. It's not bad, but this phosphorus is way past this critical limit level, way over here. Okay, so when we see that, obviously we're not recommending to apply any phosphorus, but you'll see a note down here at the bottom from the laboratory that suggests that the phosphorus is highly elevated. Avoid phosphorus containing fertilizers and organics for the next 5 years and retest annually.
And we cannot, I'm sorry, we cannot see the test that you're highlighting.
Oh, you sure can.
Main documents on the screen, but we cannot see that. There you go. There you go.
I apologize.
That's okay.
The problem with the two monitors. All right, so let me blow this up again. All right, is that better? Can you see that?
Yes, thank you.
All right, so sorry. I was just talking away. So we're looking at the analysis here. And again, here's the phosphorus level, 470 parts per million, which is elevated. And we can see on the graph it's showing that we're way past this critical limit. So this is where we kind of want that number to be dancing around, and we're way past it. So we see the note here from the lab that says the phosphorus is highly elevated and do not apply these phosphorus containing fertilizers for the next 5 years. Retest annually. So again, if we're adding compost, we're fertilizing with organic fertilizers, we're adding annually, a triple 13 or even a 15-5-10 rate fertilizer. We think we're doing great, but the soil sample is going to suggest otherwise. And we've got some work to do to bring this number back down. All right. So those are the two big monsters there, nitrogen and phosphorus, on how we respond to those. I wanted to add another little section here on sodium. And sodium can become a problem for us, particularly with our irrigation water being high in sodium, that those levels can get out of whack, and it starts having a real big impact on our soil health. This article here from the University of Arkansas Extension, I found was really relevant for the topic here when we get into remediating sodic soils, basically soils that have very high sodium content. And what happens is we start to get this dispersion, all right? And this is referencing the breakdown of our soil particles, and we get this crusting, okay? And this is restricting the movement of water and oxygen to the soil profile. So we have a soil that basically you create a barrier where water cannot penetrate. And to exemplify that a little bit better, what this graph right here is showing in this figure 2 is what happens with two different soils. So this one is our normal profile that we've been dealing with high sodium values. This one's been treated with gypsum to try to minimize that percentage. And here's just normal rainfall on the soil profile. We've added irrigation at this moment in time, and on its own, that soil moisture level keeps floating around the same. We're in a profile where we've tried to address that sodium buildup and break down that crust. We see this influx of soil moisture here within the next 20 hours, and then that tapers back off. This is what we would want to see with irrigation, right? As that water moves down, the soil is saturated, we're in a good place, and then gradually it goes back down. This is suggesting that that water is just not absorbed by the soil and doesn't provide any value for our crops. So how do we address this? Well, let me go down here and let's look at this next one here. I found this one had some pretty good details to support this and help us out. This little article that I found from the University of Arizona dives into the same material here of applying gypsum at certain rates to try to break down. What it does is that it offsets the bond, replaces it with calcium. So the salt then, or the sodium then, is rebonded and is allowed to leach out of the plant zone. So over here is we have these different layers. This ESP is a value of sodium in the soil, and this is scientifically the exchangeable sodium percentage. Anything above this 10 value is considered bad. So we start looking here, tons of gypsum per acre. And so say we have a loam soil type and we're at this 10. Again, we're not talking about acreage. So I did a little bit of quick calculation. If we do the 43,560 square feet to an acre, we're talking about adding 46 pounds of gypsum, basically a 50 pound bag of gypsum to a 500 square foot garden. So if we have a large garden, 50 pound bag cultivated into the ground, starts to help break down high sodium values and eliminate that crusting of the soil and improve and really bring our soil back into production. All right. So that gets me moving forward here to organic matter. Organic matter is a good thing, but again, too much is a good thing. So let's dive into this one. Okay. So this is basically just a newsletter article that I found here from the Oregon State University Extension Service, and basically suggesting here that, and this is really relevant, for you guys, there are environmental consequences to adding too much organic matter. Fertilizer, leaching, runoff, plant burn, wasted time, and money are all possible outcomes. So, we're always saying, you hear, keep, adding organics in there. Yes, we agree with that. Okay, but definitely we can overdo it, and this can become a problem. And further, the research that they did here, they did a study on 27 soil samples from 27 urban gardens, uh, averaging 13% organic matter, some of them being much higher. But typically, you read resources anywhere from cooperative extension publications and materials. We're looking for the sweet spot of 3 to 5% organic matter in our soil profile. That's great. So we get below that, it's problematic. So a lot of urban sites that we're not applying organic matter to in the form of compost, mulches, organic additives, and fertilizers, that organic matter will be zero or close to zero. And so that's not good. But when we start inching up above this 5, closer to 10, it's equally problematic. We start getting some real big imbalances in that soil profile, and we're having a lot of potential runoff issues into our watersheds. So, good read with that, introducing the topic for us. Plenty more in there, so I'd encourage you to find that and read through it. I'm going to show another soil analysis here. And if I have, okay. All right, so this one, I got to bring it over here so y'all can see it. Okay. Now, if I have any of my old Fort Bend master gardeners on the call today, I'm not trying to publicly shame you. This was one of the samples. So we had all of our gardens there. I said, hey, why don't y'all send samples in and let's see how we're doing out here. And that came off with some pretty good information. So as we dig down this sample, first things first, we see our pH, 8.1. Okay. So the alarms are going off there. That's the first one. We need to highlight and say, okay, what are our opportunities here to try to inch that down some. Second one we see here is our nitrogen level. I don't see it. There's nothing there. Okay, so the lab sample is showing nothing here. So there's a question mark. What's going on there? All right, so it's obviously we need to be applying some nitrogen there because we're just not seeing it on the sample. Let's go through these. Again, our phosphorus level is elevated. It's not crazy, but it is elevated. We've got high levels on the rest of our macronutrients. Showing our sulfur's a little low here for some application for it. When I scroll down, I encourage them to test for organic matter. If you do a soil sample, you can do just the basic sample that tests for your 6 macronutrients, and with pH, and then you can start layering all these additional tests. And so one of those is organic matter. It's going to cost you a couple more dollars, but I would recommend it because that's going to see where you're at. And this one here was one of the higher ones from about 15 samples of 31% organic matter. Um, so this kind of starts explaining some things here. Our phosphorus level's high. Yes, because we're putting out compost in these gardens twice a year, mulching on top. So eventually the mulch is breaking down and on top of compost that we're applying, and we're probably applying some um, additional organic granular fertilizer on there. So all that combined is highly elevating this organic matter content. Well, we know about nutrient binding is that this organic matter level in here are the bacteria in the soil that are trying to digest this, and they're working really hard. This is like spending the day at Golden Corral. They're working hard on it. And the offset to that is that they are utilizing the mineral nitrogen as part of that feeding process. So, they feed on a big chunk of organic matter. They feed on nitrogen in the soil. And so that becomes bound up. So until this matter goes down to that 3 to 5%, once that happens, then they start releasing minerals. And so that we might see this nitrogen level start to spike back up as that organic matter is completely digested in the soil and the bacteria has made that plant available. This number may flare back up and we may end up somewhere we want to be. But in the meantime, if there's any in the soil, it's all being bound up by this elevated level amount of organic matter. So don't get to this point. And if you do, stop what you're doing and let Mother Nature digest this and let that value go back down. So to further understand this, we have the last one here. Okay, and this was a article I found from the University of Minnesota Extension talking about correcting problems caused by using too much fertilizer and manure. Again, all this is what I've mentioned here, suggesting that we're going to have overabundance and imbalances in mineral and soil. And we can come down in here and we can identify ways to adjust these balances. So the first one here is stop adding compost. I know you got me recorded here saying that, but it's true. We need to hold back. So soils with excessive compost tend to have elevated phosphorus concentrations. So hold back, let the microorganisms digest that material. We will be offsetting with additional nitrogen fertilizers in that time frame. Okay, so I would recommend that a hybrid approach to this is we use ammonium sulfate, urea, readily available, quick release nitrogen form in these types of environments to allow the nitrogen needs of those plants to be met while we're letting Mother Nature digest that overabundance of organic matter and then gradually re-releasing that into the soil profile. If all this is seems like too much that you can handle, contact your local extension office there, contact one of your representatives there with your Bear County Master Gardener program and have them kind of hold your hand and say, here's my soil analysis, here's where I'm at, and give me some recommendations on how to address this. And we would be glad to do that. A lot of times it's going to be a combination of different products, holding back on maybe things that you've been doing, and then recommending some things to add to that to start addressing those imbalances. And then in response to you addressing that, come back a year later, retest that soil, and let's see what progress we made and then further steps that we can do to stabilize the soil condition moving forward. Yeah, no, there's some other good material in here for you to read. So again, I would go back and read that whole uh, article. So I'm going to, just for grins, kind of finish me up if you haven't already. Soil testing. TAMU.edu is the URL for our soil, water, and forage testing laboratory in College Station. And if you come over here, we've got a list of publications that will guide you through some of the things that I've discussed in my presentation today. And then our submittal forms are here. And then we've got some calculators here based off of different fertilizer types. So once we get, those pounds per 1,000 square foot rate on our report, we can use these calculators in here to help us identify different fertilizer types and the amount of fertilizer that we need to apply within those confines. And again, sometimes it'll be a combination. This calculator here will show you, if I can get to it here. I'll use this one with the common fertilizer. So we put in, the recommended rate per 1,000 square feet on these macronutrients. Then we select the common types of fertilizers that are somewhat to that balance, and then it'll kick us out a recommendation. The type of fertilizer and how many pounds of that. And if there's any minerals in here where that need has not been satisfied, it'll tell you, well, we can apply this 15-5-10 fertilizer at 4 pounds, but you're still going to need a little bit of nitrogen. And so that extra nitrogen could be applied through chemical or organic form, whether it's ammonium sulfate or blood meal, other guano potentially, organic sources that are high in nitrogen to get us to that value that we need. Okay, so I'm going to go back just to the our submittal forms. Okay, so the form here. So for most of the audience here today, this is going to be our relevant form. Soil for organic gardens, the urban soil submittal form. So we're going to click on that. And here's our form. Let's see. Okay. All right. So if you haven't seen this before, I'll go through it real quick. All your information here goes on the top, who you are, making payment, etc. First one here I mentioned, there's routine analysis, okay, $12 per sample. It's going to test your pH and all your macronutrients, okay? These are the main 6 nutrients that plants use the most of. And so it just gives us a snapshot, all right? Further than that, what I would recommend if we're getting serious about this is adding in our micronutrients, okay? These are the nutrients that are in lesser demand, but are necessary for positive and vigorous plant growth and development. Add a couple dollars to that, and we get the list of those micronutrients there as well. Going further, this test number 4, this might be the sweet spot, particularly if you're growing seasonal vegetable gardens. This is the one I would do because we're getting our micronutrients, and we're getting a snapshot on that organic matter percentage, okay? Cost you more, but if you look at the difference here between the volume of harvest potential. Okay. This value all of a sudden goes away. If I can address that and I can double the amount of production based off of addressing these by knowing them, then this is non-existent because my profit value is by far overshadowing the additional cost of this sample. So for people that are doing micro farms and you're planting multiple crops per year, this is the way to go for me. Prior to planting each year, I'm doing this, okay, because I want to dial that in and I want to have my soil exactly where I want it to be prior to planting so that I ensure that, a healthy crop from day one is going to outcompete weeds. It's going to be able to handle minimal pest and disease pressure. It's going to be able to handle drought issues, heat, increased heat tolerance. So all that adds up to so much more than this cost here. So we check off this number 4, fill out this here, talks about, a vegetable garden, square footage, last time you fertilized, what was the rate of fertilizer that you applied. I'm growing on the second page here. If we're going to stick with vegetables, we're going to put in D. Reference for vegetable garden, we put a D in here. Request analysis, we're checking 4. And 4 again is this macro and micro with the organic matter. And we're taking the sample. We've got some instructions here on how to do that, where to ship it, and then they're going to email you that reference page, that report, similar to this one here. And you can read through that. You can print it, take a copy of it to your extension office, and we'll guide you through how you respond to that. So pretty easy. I mean, I just took you from A to Z on how to conduct that. Not rocket science. It is soil science, but it is practical and easy for you to do. So with that, I've got a couple minutes left here, and I will address any questions that people might have.
Great, because we do have some questions, Boone. And first of all, I really appreciate what you said about working with your local master gardeners, because as you said, even in Bexar County alone, we have a number of different soil types. It's not like there's one soil type here. So we may give you different guidance depending on what part of the county even that you live in. So really appreciate you adding that, and that's important. And by the way, if you are interested in getting a copy of this document that Boone was going through, just email us at cultivate@bearmg.org. That's cultivate@bearmg.org. And we will be happy to share this document with you. And Boone, with that, we do have several questions for you, if you don't mind. So first, this is a great question. How should I take a soil test if the builder has put soil on top of the rocky soil? This person lives in North Bexar County, where basically we have rock for soil. There maybe is half an inch of soil on top, and the builder has put soil on top of that. And so she's wondering, do you take soil from the 6 inches or more down, or just the topsoil? Can you help clarify that for them?
Sure. And that's a common trend with new residential development, but that has become your soil. And we don't know where it was sourced from. A lot of times that's riverbed soil. So they'll take a silt soil from elbows and river basins that end up actually being pretty good soil that have good texture to them, silt, sand, loam. They don't like using clays because clays are hard to move around, for a builder. So you might end up with something that's not terrible, but that will be the soil from then on that your plants have to grow in. So that would be the profile that you're testing. And we look at most plants. If I go out and I've got a shrub that's been established for several years, and after a heavy rain, if I yank that thing up out of the ground, roots and all, you'll see that the roots are going out, and that fibrous root system is within that top 6 to 8 maybe 10 inches of soil depth, not much more than that. So if that's all you have, and you have caliche base underneath that, then that's the area that your plants are growing in, and that's the area that you need to be testing.
Thank you for that clarification. This is a question about the gypsum. If you are going to use gypsum and add that, should it be laid on top of existing beds and lawns, or does it need to be cultivated into the soil? She said
Well,
she's inherited a bit of a mess, so she's wondering if she needs to cultivate this all in or if she can just put
yeah.
it on top.
Well, sometimes it's just a consequence of where we're at. If this is an existing landscape, ripping things out and cultivating into that soil may not be practical for you. And probably it's just not going to work. So, what you would read in the article there on gypsum, the University of Arkansas article on gypsum as a soil amendment. It'll dive into that in further detail. But basically, it suggests that it's really not that water soluble and quick acting. So, incorporating it into the soil profile and watering it in, and that helps to disperse it into the soil profile quicker. But it is pretty slow acting. The article is suggesting that up to 6 months before that starts activating and you start seeing some improvements because of that application of gypsum. So if you can, incorporate it in, disc it in, water it in repeatedly. But if you can't, a surface application, but just finding ways, if you can aerate the soil with some type of aeration device that allows that mineral to dive down into those perforated aerated holes, that would help. But if you can't do that, it's just through regular watering, trying to get that gypsum to migrate down into the soil profile.
Okay, oh, thank you. This individual says she has trouble with soil crusting. In other words, when she turns over the top inch or two of the soil, she says she notices a white powdery substance underneath, and she doesn't know if that's salt residue, if it's something that should be fixed using just gypsum, or if she should do a soil analysis on that. So questions about how to deal with that.
Well, there's a question mark on it. So, the first thing we would say is, consult your extension office, consult one of the master gardeners there to try to really hone in on what we're dealing with here, because what you've explained to me could be several things. One, it could be mycelial growth, which is fungal, basically root development and fungi underneath the mulch layer. It's pretty typical as you'll see a cloudy white mess underneath there. That's really nothing to worry about. That's just digesting fungi, eating away at the organic matter. So if that's the case, you can just cultivate, rake up the mulch, break up that layer, and you're in good shape. If we get down further than that, we could be talking about salt buildup, and we know a lot of our water, whether it's well or municipal sourced, but definitely through well or surface water, we've got a lot of mineral in there. That's a full range of salts. And when we say salt, this is all types of mineral salts, all combined. And so what we have is this total dissolved salts based off of some of the more detailed soil analysis. But all that just starts to drop and collect, and we'll get a space there as we dig into the profile. We will notice that different color or that chalky color in the soil where those salts have accumulated. Again, going back to something like soil aeration, finding ways to core aerate and lift plugs out of that to break that layer up, trying to find ways to incorporate either gypsum or some organic matter down into those voids will break up some of that layer. And then it could also just be this sodium issue, this sodic condition of soil where sodium content accumulates to the point where we have what is called crusting. where we get that hard pan layer there that water and nutrients and oxygen cannot penetrate. So any way to break those up, the gypsum does its job to displace that sodium, making it leachable, so it will start to break down on its own. It's just finding ways to get that gypsum down into that layer, which tends to be a little deep down into the profile.
Very good. Thank you. Boone, we happen to be having our training class for new interns this week, and this question relates to that. One of them, they learned in class this week that Bexar County naturally has about 0.5% organic matter. And you mentioned that 3 to 5% is ideal. And they were taught that we naturally have about 0.5. So they're wondering about how long would it take to add too much compost when we have that little bit of organic matter to start with. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so the long answer there is for us to, we develop these artificial landscapes, you might say. A residential landscape becomes artificial. We're defining the parameters of what exists there. And so we look at, that same area there in Bexar County, naturally would have had a higher amount of organic matter because we'll have, fires coming through and old vegetation falling, dying, decaying, animals, large animals, dying and decaying, uh, uh, huge animals defecating, and so we have manure wastes there, and so naturally, Mother Nature would have been providing that organic matter source for that humic layer to continually establish. But what we've done is we've kind of taken all of that ability for that ecosystem to bring in food to keep that organic matter level up is non-existent. So it's up to us. So it's a balanced approach of adding compost and regular use of wood mulch to create that input of organic matter that Mother Nature would have provided. We now have to do that. So again, it is a good thing. We can, annually apply the correct amount of compost. And if it is a finished, fine quality compost, we're talking about less than a quarter of an inch, right? We're not talking about inches or, piles of compost. It doesn't take much if we're applying that annually. Mulch, a 4-inch layer of wood mulch applied in January, by December of that year will be an inch, and it hasn't flown off. It hasn't leached off. It's being digested by the microorganisms, and it's becoming that humic layer. It's becoming that organic matter complex there for you. So, being cognizant of adding those in, but not to over address it. Don't pile on, heaping loads of compost. Doesn't take much. We get probably the bigger benefit by regular annual applications of wood mulch that is constantly decaying and providing that value for us.
Okay, thank you. This is a question about potted plants. This individual has huge potted plants and large plants, and they're wondering, in this case, an avocado tree, and they're wondering, is it worth testing that soil to determine what the soil composition is in the pot? Do people send in soil tests for potted plants?
They do. Uh, they do, but unfortunately, the soil makeup in containers tends to be high in organic matter to the point of almost 75-80%. You go to a box store and you buy a container planting soil, big, 2 cubic foot bag of it. Um, the contents of that are mostly ground up wood products organic matter sources with a little bit of mineral content, a little bit of inorganic content, which would be a little clay, a little silt, or some sand mixed into that to help give it some texture. Those are hard to test. When we get up into real high levels of organic matter, the soil labs have a really hard time getting a quality analysis on that. So it's one that can give you a little bit of information, but I wouldn't go solely on that report based off of what you get from it on the back end.
Okay, thanks. We are out of time, but I'm going to squeeze in one more quick question because I think you can answer it fairly quickly. This individual has a 30 by 3 by 1 foot garden box, but it sits on top of asphalt, and they're wondering if that's a problem and should they move it.
I would be cognizant of the crops that you're growing in there. So with a certain depth, annual vegetable crops, they're not there long enough to develop an extensive root system that's going to mine down in to that asphalt profile. So stuff like lettuces, radish, turnips, things that are quick in and out. That's what I would suggest. We get into longer growing season crops. They may mine down into that, and that might be a hazard there associated with it. A lot of times what we see in that is a person would put 4 or 5 layers of cardboard boxes down, establish the frame for the raised bed on top of that, and then fill that in with your soil. So we create a little bit of an interface there between the asphalt and our growing media. So we're not so really worried about any potential issues there.
All right, Boone, thank you so much. Such great information. We appreciate you joining us. For everybody, that's it for our first session. Our next workshop is going to begin promptly at 10:30, and we have a special guest for you, so you don't want to be late. We will see you at 10:30. Boone, thank you again. See everybody soon.
Thank you. Take care.
You too.